Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Del. We're back again.
We are. And today we thought we would talk about perfectionism. And as we always say, it's these subjects are always about not just how we relate to each other and our expectations of perfectionism, but also how we relate to ourselves and what we do to ourselves when we have this really high bar of what we consider to be perfect, and how that can just mess with us on every level, certainly in our relationships.
Absolutely.
I was just saying to Barry that these conversations are always initiated by something that's either come up in my personal life or through coaching a client or a friend that's discussed things with me. And I've really noticed the theme this week seemed to be about this expectation that one person is so perfect for us that they meet all of our needs. And if they don't, God forbid, we either write them off or we work really hard to make them perfect. And again, as I said, we do it to ourselves too. So what is your experience, Barry, when it comes to perfectionism?
I definitely run it on myself over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say less so, but certainly it seems like I've done it more there than I have with other prospective partners. And the thing for me is I know in my singlehood that when I'm meeting women, that it's usually things I notice that pull me away from enjoying them, sort of thing. It's not so much perfectionism, more it's about distraction. It's more the inner game or the inner voice and the inner, I won't say monologue, pretty better way of putting it. Go through it. And it's much better now than it was when I was younger because I've done a lot of work on myself. But I know there's parts of me still, and because I mentioned, first started doing this work in like full on was back in when I met this woman who was coming out of this place and said at that time, back in 2006, 2007 rather, where talking to beautiful women wasn't in my comfort zone because I didn't feel myself equal to them. So I had this perfection thing about they were perfect and I wasn't.
Oh, wow.
And so I ran that and I ran that all the way through up until that point, which is, almost 20 years ago now. It was 15, 17 years ago. And so the thing was that for many years, I would not allow myself to entertain the idea of being with a woman who I looked as being so beautiful, so attractive. I mean, I basically put her on a pedestal, and I would not be on a pedestal myself. So I definitely had this imbalance of internal disqualification because they were perfect and I wasn't. Yes.
I'm listening to you, Barry, and I'm thinking, oh dear, maybe I'm a little more narcissistic than I thought.
Well, this is in a way that's in the conversation because it's kind of like, can you have self-confidence, self-respect without becoming so ego-driven or so narcissistic? Because it's like there's two different camps. Because you can really be trusting your own, not perfection, but certainly that you value who you are and you think you're worthy enough of anybody you meet. That's not necessarily narcissism, except that when you start thinking you're superior to other people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the borderline. But
Yeah,
definitely I'm two views.
No, that's great, and that is a good distinction. For sure, when I was younger, I definitely know that I was attracted to what I considered broken people that had if you had come from the two-parent perfect family, had no struggles in your life, I would look at you as not even so much perfect, but unrelatable. I kept thinking, sorry, is my dog making it's a little hot in here. He's making some panting noises in the background. But I would just think, we can't relate to each other because I came from such an unusual upbringing that I couldn't. But I do think in some ways there was that tape running very, very low. Even though I said we can't relate, I think there was this thing of you're too perfect for me. I need somebody that's sort of a bit messed up as well, or come from a messed up background that I can relate to. So that was definitely playing then. But if anything, if I'm really, really honest, which I usually am here, which is,
Yeah, say.
yeah, unfortunately, that's just me. I have to say, I've projected a lot of that, sort of my perfectionism on about my what I should live up to on the internal. I externalize that too. I
Hmm.
definitely can be. I can start being negative. I can start seeing the faults in the, or used to much more, far more. But I'm going to be own it. I can still do it. I catch myself, and
Right.
I just say, hang on a minute, is that true? And about sort of when you look at somebody and you say, well, they're not this, it's we feel what we put our attention on. We experience what we put our attention on. So if we're noticing the things where we may be not a perfect match, or there are differences, well, we're going to feel that. It's just going to amplify. We're going to feel the differences, and we're going to feel that we're not a perfect match for each other. Whereas if you place your focus on the things that are really great about your relationship, then you experience it completely differently. So I'm so
Right.
aware of that, that I can catch myself if I feel that my mood is going a little down a bit and I'm getting a little, restless or dissatisfied in my relationship. I immediately go, oh, you're focusing on the differences, not on the compatibilities. You're focusing
Hmm.
on what's lacking as opposed to what's there. And as soon as I put my attention on what's there, my mood immediately lifts and I feel great. I'm this happy camper.
Well, that's the thing, is having those um, internal practices or those reminders to pull yourself out of those old loops. I mean, I know, again, it's like I definitely had those old patterns, and they're still persistent, even though they're not as common as they used to be. But I do notice that I'm more present to when I hear that voice show up, start running those tapes like, "Oh, she's too good," or "You're not good enough," or those things were that perfection things start showing up. I tend to be quicker at catching it, which is kind of what the work is anyway. It's really about
Exactly.
the sooner you catch things, then the sooner they stop having impact and you start to move forward. That's true of all the work we do. And so for me, that was definitely, I remember that the gaps between when that happened and when I caught it getting much quicker. So I'm not being run by it unconsciously, because where it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
without me having awareness that I'm, cutting myself off. And so, but it's still, but it, it still happens where I notice a woman in some environment and I won't go up and talk to her because part of me still has that little niggle of like, not going to work or whatever it is. And so I definitely notice it's not completely gone. I'm not immune to it. I'm not perfect yet.
Barry's got some homework.
Always, always. Come on.
I'm going to give Barry some homework. He's got to approach 10 women this week and that seem out of his league and
Mhm.
break that habit. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. And it is like, as I said, if I notice I'm doing it with my partner, I immediately can go, okay, where do I do that to myself too? And I really can. I can see how I can run myself into the ground of not being good enough, or I can catch myself and I can place my focus. And again, it's not sort of this building yourself up and ego talk. It's just like, no, Del, you've accomplished this, you've accomplished this, you've accomplished this. Stop
Yeah.
looking at all the things you didn't accomplish, and honor the things you did. And it's the same thing as, again, it's the same thing if we're looking at a relationship. I have somebody in my life that we were talking the other day, and I said, because there is this loop I hear of dissatisfaction with her partner, and um, and in the end, it was like, well, maybe make a list of all the great things he brings into the relationship, just as a reminder, because I
Yeah.
think our minds, we can forget. And I know it sounds silly to make a list, but it's,
No.
I usually tell my clients that are dealing with, a narcissistic ex-partner, to instead of getting sucked back into that love bombing, to make a list of the facts of how that person behaved in the relationship, so that it keeps you based in reality. It keeps your feet on the
Mm.
ground. It's instead of, because we tend to sort of gloss over some of the things and just remember the good things. But the
Yep.
same works for a relationship. Make a list of all the things you really love about your partner and how they're
Hmm.
perfect for you in so many ways. And when you find yourself going into that negativity or questioning, whether there's somebody better for you or a better fit for you, just look at that list and go, hold on a minute, is that true? And it's so funny because she reported to me a few days later. She went, "Oh my God, I did it. I wrote the list." And we've had the most amazing week because I have a reminder now of all the things I absolutely love about him and what he does bring to the relationship.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. You know,
That thing about the remembering piece, I was just reflecting on recent conversations I had with people who have honestly edified me about like either my book or things I've written. Because I'm writing some articles for an alumni group I'm part of. I mean, a business mastermind alumni group I'm part of, and realizing that I don't hold on to those as easily. Like the praise or the love or the edification that I get, it's kind of like I still watch myself fight with that to a degree. Like, don't simply just comfortably take it on. Even though at the time they say it, I love it and appreciate it, it doesn't sustain. That's
yeah,
one of my hope assignments, So I know I'm working on that one.
yeah. I think that's. I have a theory on this. I think
Please.
part of our evolution is to focus on the negative and the danger, because we don't have to protect ourselves against all the good stuff. But as human beings, to survive, we have to remind ourselves of the danger or the negatives and things like that. I think
Mm.
not for everybody. A lot of people um, fall more into that category of seeing. It's not even so much seeing the glass as half empty as or half full, but it's more about that little repetitive voice we have in our head that whispers those things. It's not saying, "Be careful, you're really great." It's, "Be careful, you might not be good enough here,"
Yeah,
or, "Be careful, don't
exactly.
make a fool of yourself," or, "Be careful," just like you, not wanting to approach a woman that you find attractive because your mind is going, "Be careful, you could get rejected." Um,
Well, and just to be clear, I think my mind is actually going, "See, like, don't approach because you probably will be rejected. It's not like it might be," because that's the old tape playing.
yeah,
And this will say this piece too, because I know I'm very conscious of this stuff. That's why I'm not ashamed of talking about it. Is the recognition is that that tape ran automatically without me being aware of it for many many years. So now when it happens, I'm almost amused by it because I recognize that's the pattern, but it doesn't control me anymore.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. It's such a And these tapes are not based in reality. They're just not.
No,
I mean, they're just an assumption we made as a young child that was actually a defense. It helped us out when we maybe a small. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the things that my mother used to say to me, like, "Don't get too big for your boots," or the higher you climb, the further you fall, and all those things that we used to hear as a child about staying humble, staying small, not thinking too much of yourself. Those were drilled in. And again, not only that, I had a sister who was very, very beautiful. And I was always the not so pretty sister. And so I could never, ever, hello,
sorry. My phone, my phone should be muted. It shouldn't be doing that. Excuse me.
do you got to keep checking mine now too. But it took me years to really be able to look back on some photographs of myself and go, I really wasn't that bad. Why did I always think of myself as the ugly duckling or the ugly younger sister? And
Because it was a comparison thing.
well, exactly because of the comparison thing again. Back to the perfectionism. If I'm not as pretty or skinny or as beautiful as her, then I'm not as valuable as her. But yeah, it took years and years and years to sort of, and it is, you look back at photographs and you think, what a shame we waste all these years with this internal, you know, gauge of what's perfect or not.
Well, the thing is, and we talked about this before about how we get imprinted at a very young age by what our parents tell us and how they act around us. And the thing is, though, like you said, your mother's voice was telling all these things. This is the challenges that at times we think we listen to what we're telling ourselves. We forget it wasn't our voice, as you said earlier. It wasn't our voice in the first place. We just took what was told to us by an adult, parent, whatever, that we then started listening to in our own voice inside. We basically rewrote it in our own script, sort of thing. So we carried that false belief that wasn't ours in the first place,
Yeah.
but we're still carrying it because that was enforced by somebody we trusted, unfortunately, or fortunately in that sense. And so we believe what they said was true. And so even though they're not around necessarily in our life, either because they're not on the planet anymore or just not around geographically, but we tend to repeat the same tape again and again, but now we're in our own recording. It wasn't our voice in the first place, but we've made it our voice, which is
Exactly.
unfortunate.
I mean, thankfully, I won't say in terms of my mother, she never made me feel that I was less than compared to my sister. But I do remember a boy saying to me once when I remember I was about 18, they said, "What must it be like to be your sister's, have your sister as an older sister?" And I
Mhm.
said, and they said, anyway, it was so funny. And it was like, they were like, "It must be really hard. It must be really hard coming second all your life."
Nice.
Okay, all right.
Boy.
So, but going back to this perfectionism, what it
Mhm.
does to us, it absolutely stops us from enjoying, number one, our successes, enjoying the good things about our relationships, what it is about the other person we really enjoy. As I said, it's a really good reminder that our feelings are coming from our thinking about the situation, not the person themselves. And I had that awareness when I was very, very young. I think one of my first relationships, I remember having these highs and lows of being madly in love with my boyfriend and then hating him and thinking, this is incredible that I can have such a range of emotions about the same person, that I could
Mhm.
be so, when I say hate, not really hating, but completely not in love with him, disinterested, bored, or whatever the words were. Um,
Right.
and I really saw then, oh my God, it's my thinking. Depending on what mood I'm in and what tapes are running, I can have a completely different experience of the same person. And I've often said my boyfriend Hootie is the most steady as a rock person on earth. So he's actually the best barometer of my craziness, of my up and down, like you're in, you're out sort of thinking that I can have, very black and white.
If he's not changing, you can reference based on his stability where you are or where you're not at the time.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's just the same. He's just loving, loyal, amazing, beautiful, great, funny. And then there's days when I adore all those things, and there's days where I'm like getting a little irritated.
Because he's not changing for you. Hmm.
No, it's because I'm seeing what is consistent behavior in a different way depending on my mood.
Yeah.
So yes,
No, but there's a couple of things that I was going to touch on as well. That it's interesting that if you want to be really self humiliating of yourself, if you want to humiliate yourself, know there's always somebody better than you somewhere on the planet. I mean, that's the fact of life. There's always somebody at the top of the heap, so to speak, and 7.9 million billion people aren't that person.
hmm
So first of all, if you're worried about trying to be perfect, forget it. But on the other hand, which I love to talk about as well, is that nobody else can be like you, which means you are the best you can be. Therefore, you're perfect as you are.
exactly. Yeah,
They said again, you're perfect as you are because nobody else can do you as bad as well as you can. So by default, you're perfect.
yeah,
There's nothing to get to. There's nothing to achieve. So when you can really, I'm saying the word grok as from a Robert Heinlein movie, book rather. When you can really get that, and you understand that, and you start trusting that being perfect isn't being special; it's about being you,
hmm
and that's the key. Because perfection isn't a special place to be. It's really about just being yourself,
yeah.
ultimately.
No, absolutely. That's the other thing I would say, that this whole comparison thing we do, this whole sort of
Mhm.
it's all happening in the personal mind. It's
Right.
not who we are on a spiritual level. We all, as I say, we all come from the same source. There's no way, if there is a God or a universe or whatever it is that's in charge, that goes, I'm going to make you a bit more special than everybody else. It doesn't happen that way. We all come onto this planet equally incredibly beautiful beings. Now, how we manifest and how we show up and the choices we make, then we start looking a little different. But at our
Right.
essence, at our core, we're all completely 100% equal. I think that's what, and that's been so firmly embedded in me that for many years now, that's what stops me being starstruck or ever think, oh, somebody's better than me. I don't think I'm better than anybody either, because I just know that. Whereas, as I've mentioned before, I grew up and as you did too, in the UK, there was this class system that was, so prevalent when I lived there. Anyway, it was like,
Yeah.
you know, the upper class, the middle class, the working class, the blue collars. There was so many class levels, and everybody's vying for what level do I fit in. And that's what I actually found really beautifully refreshing about America when I came here, was like, oh my God, you didn't have to be born upper middle
Hmm.
class and have the BBC accent to get on in the world. And it's very different now, because obviously you can see that it's far less of that, but it still exists. I think it still
Yeah.
exists.
I mean, I remember as a kid, in my teenage years, that I was born and raised working class. I mean, my dad used to work in the on a production line at Ford's in Dagenham, but I mean, he was a production line worker. That was his job when he was working. And then he went to work for other places. So I always knew that my roots were very much blue collar. That was where I came from. But my father's mother was attached to being middle class, and when he married my mother, who was also working class, she never accepted it. She didn't like it at all. And it took until I was probably 14, 15 years old when my dad finally said to his mother and that side of the family, no more. And so all that time judging and blaming or putting all this weight on him for choosing someone of a lower stature, which he wasn't. It was equal.
Mm,
We basically, we disowned that part of the family and never talked to them again.
yeah,
And it's,
it's so
and
funny.
that was, I mean, that was the rift of that. So yeah, the class system back then was very firmly in place.
It really was, and yeah, and so well, I've expressed how my childhood was. We definitely, never mind, I won't go into it again. We've been there before, but it's definitely it when you've got that class system going on, or that us and them, or I'm better, I'm less than. It's just noise. It's all personal thinking. It's getting in the way of us um, living life to the fullest. It's getting in the way of us enjoying our successes. It lives it, and again, it even keeps us in such a tight little box of if I'm not perfect, like you were saying about being in a relationship, if I'm not perfect, I can't go out there and meet somebody. And how many people are lonely, believing that they need to work on themselves before they can be in a relationship. There's
Hmm.
somebody for everybody. Somebody for everybody. I don't believe in trying to. I mean, definitely self-awareness, I think, is the key, but trying to change who we fundamentally are to become a perfect version of ourselves that we can't sustain. And like we've talked
Right.
about this before too, about going on a date and presenting this image of ourselves that we think this person wants. Well, that's going to disintegrate really fast, because I'm
Absolutely.
sorry, it's exhausting to keep up a false front. Just be
Hmm.
you. Be the best version of you, by all means. I'm thinking all agreements tonight, but be impeccable with your word. Do your best. Don't assume
Yeah,
things, and those basic truths. I think about how we function in life. But be you, unashamedly you. You know.
absolutely. That's a fundamental way of doing life, and it is. As I said, it's like the idea about being the best you can be. So why not celebrate that? Why not be in a place where you honor that yourself and you take care of yourself? And yes, sometimes you might discover you made bad choices in situations, whether it's work or love or food or whatever it is. But you can always course correct. The truth is, the good news is we have time on the planet to do things. So if you made a mistake, you don't use it as a cudgel to keep beating yourself up after that.
Yeah.
You can move on. You can heal. You can grow, and you can then get back on the horse, so to speak, and become more self-aligned.
I love that what you're just saying there, because I was about to say that it reminds me of the USM thing. It's like, and I firmly believe there are no mistakes in life. I really firmly believe that there are those rumble things that when you sort of go off the road a bit, they rumble to wake you up and make you aware that you're going off the road a bit. Um,
Dot spots, I think they call them.
yeah, yeah. I heard rumble at some point, but they do. They're just little wake up calls to say, "Hey, are you on the course that you want to be on?" Sometimes
Hmm.
people want to run off the road. That's fine too. But if you want to stay in the road and you hit one of those little spots to just say, "Hey, you're veering off the road," that's all it is. It's just a reminder,
Yeah,
just to check in. Am I going in the direction I want to go in? But
absolutely.
that's another show we should do on mistakes. I firmly believe to label something a mistake is it's hard to go anywhere from that. It's like, oops, I hit something
It's,
that was wrong. It's like, no, I hit a bump and I'm carrying on moving forward. I'm just veering in the other direction a bit.
we can definitely talk about that in another episode because it's something that a lot of people face that may not know how to handle in the wisest way.
Yeah, exactly. And oh, sorry, I'm so dry here today. It's very, very hot in Southern California. For those that don't know it, out down it's like 110 degrees or something. So yeah. So anyway, so besides the fear of failure that we have with ourselves, when we put this perfectionism on our partner, I mean, who wants to be constantly reminded that they're not meeting somebody's expectations?
Right.
I mean, I know growing up that it was that I know that as a feeling as a child when you don't meet your parents' expectations, how awful that feels. And when you can go back there and imagine how that feels, why would you want to do that to another human being?
Yeah.
Is that really going to foster a good relationship? Is that really going to feed the positive energy between you when you're constantly reminding your partner of what they're not doing?
Yeah. I've got vivid memories of that one myself, but definitely the trap that we put ourselves in is when we forget we have choice. Because the thing is, there's so much of a default behavior we can have, and this is something true for a lot of people who, again, we talked about this before in other episodes about being raised in a certain environment, so we carry that behavior forward. It becomes a default behavior, and sometimes when we're caught in the trap of seeking perfection in somebody else because we're not facing it ourselves, that we keep defaulting without thinking it. Basically, it's autopilot. We're not actually saying, you know what, hang on a second, I want to make a different choice. I want to see you as you really are. I don't want to try and make you something you're not. And also in the mirror.
Mm.
But frankly, if we did more of that, boy, our relationships would massively improve, and so would our relationship with ourselves. Because when we start to see, as I said earlier, it's like that we are already the best we can be. I know the army talks about being all you can be, all you can be. Well, you are all you can be.
Mm-hmm.
You can add to that, but even if you don't, you're still perfect as you are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that reminder we have to start putting in new programming, new words, new affirmations in a way of who we really are, because the trap we fall into is forgetting and just defaulting to what we were raised with, which may not be ideal.
Yeah, and the other point I really want to bring up too, because like I said, I can fall into that trap quite often of being critical or expecting certain things or looking at the what's lacking as opposed to what's there. Is
Yeah.
when you catch yourself doing that, it's the most wonderful thing in the world to say to your partner, I am so sorry. I realize I've been really a bit of a nag or negative, whatever, yesterday or the day, whenever. Just when you own it and you can say it, it's such a gift to give to the other person. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we're afraid of admitting things. We're afraid of saying, I'm sorry. We think, well, they didn't say anything, so maybe I just let that one go. It's like, no, acknowledge it. If you catch yourself by putting a voice to it and saying, I just caught myself being negative or critical, I'm so sorry about that. It's so, well, empowering for yourself anyway. But it's also just adds to the what's the word I'm looking for? The goodwill of the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
the love, that bank account we talk about filling that bank account. Well, the perfectionism and the being critical and that's like taking those deposits out of that bank account. It's just withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing. And you can easily top it back up by just saying, I'm so sorry, I just noticed I was really critical, or I've been a bit of a nag, or I've been ungrateful, or whatever it is. You can
Yep.
top it up again.
Indeed, definitely. Apologies and honesty and just being vulnerable and transparent can be massively gifting into your relationship. And yes, fill up the bank account that way is a smart move.
Okay. Next show is, what did we just say it's going to be? And we're not doing that anymore, are we? Just in case we change our minds. There's one there that we brought up that we thought would be a good show. So I think that was.
Yeah, it was. Oh crap! What was it? It's on tip of my tongue. We'll have to review and we'll come back to it. Yes, just stay tuned for the next episode.
Stay tuned. Join us next week. All right. Well,
Yep.
wonderful week, everybody. Thank you for joining us again, and thank you,
Yeah,
Mary.
we'll see you
and
then.
see you next week.
Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. Bye bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode, fresh and shiny, as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.